The cable car hung limp, swaying slightly in the cold mountain breeze. It was a stark reminder of how quickly things could go wrong in the wilderness. Silence filled the air, broken only by the wind whistling through the mountain peaks. The sound was eerie, almost haunting, as if the mountains themselves were whispering secrets of past tragedies. Below, the world stretched out, a vast canvas of rock and pine. The landscape was both beautiful and intimidating, a reminder of nature's raw power and majesty. Chad Warwick, his face etched with worry, scanned the unforgiving terrain. He was stranded, miles from civilization, with no immediate hope of rescue. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on his shoulders. The mountain, a majestic peak in the Colorado Rockies, had turned into a trap. What was once a symbol of adventure and freedom now felt like a prison, its towering presence both awe-inspiring and menacing. The cable car accident had left them stranded, their hope dangling by a thread. The once reliable mode of transport now lay in ruins, a testament to the unpredictability of nature. Chad, a former Army Ranger, knew the wilderness held beauty and danger in equal measure. His training had prepared him for many scenarios, but this was unlike anything he had ever faced. He would need all his skills to survive. Every lesson learned, every skill honed, would be put to the test in the coming hours and days. 3 other passengers huddled nearby, their faces pale with fear. They looked to Chad for guidance, their eyes pleading for reassurance and hope. A young couple, their honeymoon turned nightmare, clung to each other. Their dreams of a romantic getaway had been shattered, replaced by a desperate struggle for survival. An older woman, her eyes wide with panic, muttered a silent prayer. Her hands trembled as she clutched a small pendant, seeking comfort in her faith. Chad knew he had to be strong, for himself and for them. The responsibility weighed heavily on him, but he steeled himself, drawing on his inner reserves of strength and determination. He took charge, his voice calm and steady, reassuring. He outlined a plan, giving each person a task to keep them focused and hopeful. He had faced danger before. This was different. This was survival. The stakes were higher, the risks greater, but Chad was determined to lead them through it. The air was thin, the altitude unforgiving. Each breath felt like a struggle, a reminder of the harsh environment they were now a part of. Chad gathered the scattered supplies from the wrecked cable car, his movements deliberate and focused. The crash had left them with little, but he knew every item could mean the difference between life and death. A first aid kit, some energy bars, and a few bottles of water-meager provisions for an unknown ordeal. These items, though few, were now their lifeline in the vast wilderness. "We stick together," he told the others, his voice firm and unwavering. In such dire circumstances, unity was their greatest strength. He introduced himself, his military background evident in his stance and tone. Chad had seen his share of tough situations, and his experience was now their guiding light. The young couple, Mark and Sarah, were honeymooners from Chicago. Their dream vacation had turned into a nightmare, but their love and determination kept them going. The older woman, Mrs. Davis, was a retired teacher from Denver. Her calm demeanor and wisdom were a source of comfort for the group. The descent was treacherous. Loose rocks tumbled down the steep slopes, each step a potential hazard. They moved cautiously, aware that one wrong move could spell disaster. The air grew colder as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the mountainside. The temperature drop was swift, and they knew they had to find shelter soon. Chad led the way, his eyes scanning for danger, his senses on high alert. Every rustle in the bushes, every distant sound, was a potential threat. He showed them how to build a makeshift shelter for the night, using branches and leaves. It wasn't much, but it would protect them from the elements. They huddled together for warmth, sharing the last of their food. The small fire they managed to start provided a flicker of comfort in the cold night. Fear hung heavy in the air, but Chad's presence, his quiet strength, offered a glimmer of hope. His calm assurance was a beacon in the darkness, a reminder that they were not alone in this fight against the wild. The next morning they gathered around a map, planning their route. Chad's knowledge of survival tactics was invaluable, and he explained the safest path down the mountain. Navigating through the dense forest was challenging. The underbrush was thick, and every step required effort. But they moved with purpose, driven by the hope of reaching safety. Relief washed over them when they found a stream. Fresh water was a precious resource, and they took the opportunity to refill their bottles and rest for a moment. Just as their spirits began to wane, they spotted a rescue helicopter in the distance. They signaled frantically, their hearts pounding with renewed hope. Help was finally on the way. Days turned into a blur of exhaustion and hunger. The mountain tested their resolve, pushing them to their limits. They rationed their meager food supplies, each bite a precious commodity. They faced treacherous cliffs, their descent a slow and dangerous dance with gravity. Chad used his knowledge of knots and ropes to lower them one by one, his heart pounding with each drop. They navigated dense undergrowth, their clothes torn, their bodies weary. Nights were the worst. The cold seeped into their bones as they huddled together for warmth. The silence of the wilderness was broken only by the howling wind and the distant cries of nocturnal creatures. Sleep was a luxury they could barely afford. Through it all, Chad remained their anchor. He treated their injuries, kept their spirits up with stories of his army days, and never let them lose hope. He knew rescue was uncertain. Survival was their only option. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. The forest was alive with the sounds of nature, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of a bird, and the gentle babbling of a stream. It was a place that seemed untouched by time, a sanctuary of wild beauty and hidden dangers. They had been following a stream, hoping it would lead them to civilization. The water's path was their guide, a silver thread weaving through the dense foliage. Each step was a mix of hope and trepidation, the promise of safety mingling with the fear of the unknown. Chad stopped abruptly, his hand raised, signaling for silence. His senses were heightened, every sound amplified in the stillness. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting. He had heard it, a low growl, deep and guttural. It was a sound that sent a shiver down his spine, a primal warning that danger was near. The growl seemed to resonate through the trees, a dark promise of what lay ahead. A black bear, its massive form emerging from the trees, stood between them and the path ahead. The bear's presence was a stark reminder of the wild's untamed power, a living embodiment of nature's raw force. Its eyes, dark and menacing, fixed on them, its presence a primal threat. The bear's gaze was unyielding, a silent challenge that spoke of ancient instincts and territorial dominance. Fear, cold and sharp, shot through Chad. His heart raced, each beat a drum of panic. He had faced enemy soldiers, but this was different. This was a confrontation with the wild, a test of survival against a force that knew no mercy. He had faced enemy soldiers, but this was different. The bear was a creature of instinct, driven by hunger and territory. There was no reasoning, no negotiation, only the raw, unfiltered reality of life and death. This was raw, untamed wilderness. A place where the rules of civilization held no sway, where survival was dictated by strength and cunning. The forest was a living entity, indifferent to their plight, its beauty a stark contrast to the danger it harbored. "Don't run," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The words were a lifeline, a fragile thread of hope in the face of overwhelming fear. He knew running would trigger the bear's predatory instincts, turning a dangerous situation into a deadly one. He knew running would trigger the bear's predatory instincts. The bear's eyes followed their every move, its body tense and ready to spring. They stood frozen, their breaths caught in their throats. As the bear pawed the ground, its growl a rumbling thunder in the stillness of the woods. They stood frozen, their breaths caught in their throats. As the bear pawed the ground, its growl a rumbling thunder in the stillness of the woods. The moment stretched, each second an eternity, the tension a palpable force that pressed down on them. Slowly, carefully, Chad reached for a rock, his heart pounding against his ribs. The movement was deliberate, each motion calculated to avoid provoking the bear. His fingers closed around the rough surface, the rock a small cold comfort in his hand. He hurled it with all his might, a desperate attempt to startle the beast. The rock flew through the air, a silent missile aimed at the bear's flank. It was a gamble, a last-ditch effort to turn the tide in their favor. The rock found its mark, striking the bear's flank. The impact was a shock, a sudden intrusion into the bear's world. The bear roared, a sound that echoed through the trees, then turned and lumbered back into the undergrowth. The bear roared, a sound that echoed through the trees, then turned and lumbered back into the undergrowth. The forest seemed to exhale, the tension dissipating like mist in the morning sun. They had survived, but the encounter left an indelible mark, a reminder of the ever-present dangers that lurked in the wild. They had survived, but the encounter left an indelible mark, a reminder of the ever-present dangers that lurked in the wild. The forest, with all its beauty and serenity, was also a place of untamed power and unpredictable threats. It was a lesson they would carry with them, a testament to the fragile balance between man and nature. If you want more stories like this, comment and subscribe to Shark Daddy Mako today. Your support helps push my content farther, so join the Shark Pack today.